Morning all. All right, so rather than starting off with a news video today or starting off talking about games from last night and all that fun stuff, we're going to talk about ownership in the National Hockey League. And this is at the forefront right now in Vancouver. But over the summer, we heard certain accusations about an owner in Edmonton, which turned out to be inaccurate. In being inaccurate and all that, there's still this question of, okay, so ownership and we as fans, what say do we have? And the reality is we don't have any say in it. I think we'd like to. I think we'd like to have the right to, bounce an owner here and there for something they've done or said. And this is certainly not unique to the National Hockey League, right? Because when it comes to being an NHL owner, the number one thing is money. So looking at these 8 topics, and I put them on the board in no particular order, although a couple of them I put right after one another for a reason. But I started off with financial issues, because to me that's the one that, yes, the NHL can step in. They can step in and say, hey, John Spano, so how much money do you have? That's not enough money. Give us the team back. There's that, right? There's also, if you look at the Coyotes and their tumultuous ownership, the NHL took over when the team declared bankruptcy. The NHL took over because they understood that the ownership that was in place was not good enough. So the NHL has, with financial issues, been willing to step in if it has to. They'd rather not. They'd rather not have to do that. They don't want to run a team on top of everything else that they're doing. But financial issues are one area where if an owner has enough of them, the NHL will say something about it. We look at Ottawa's recently passed owner, Eugene Melnyk. As an example, there was a lot of financial discussions with him, and there was some idea of, hey, if some of this ends up being true, maybe the NHL forces him to sell. In the end, that did not happen. And yet, if financial issues are really bad for an owner, yeah, the NHL might step in and say, we think your time as an NHL owner's come to an end. Now, the one that really stands out to me is a poor relationship with the community. Now, there's 2 ways to have a poor relationship with the community. You can have a poor relationship with city council. You can have an arena boot you out and end up playing out of Arizona State University, but you can make the most out of that too, right? So the Coyotes are trying to take that lemon and make it lemonade, and so far, I think they've done a pretty good job, right? Their PR's been good, and while there's other things with ownership with the Arizona Coyotes that has been talked about, is there are so many ownership groups and so many sole owners as well that have been talked about, that honestly, I could have filled the board with names, and I thought, no, we're not getting into all the specifics on all this, because then video probably gets demonetized and the comment section would be fun. So, yeah, the poor relationship with the community can be with city council, it can be with an arena, it can also be with your fans. There are definitely owners that have had contentious relationship with the fans, which I don't understand. I really don't. To me, it would make as much sense as me ending every video in, hey, it's THG, thanks for watching my video, and by the way, go to hell. Like, that would not work. That would, as a close off, that does not work to end a video, right? And people would be like, I'm kind of tired of him telling me that. I think he has a bad relationship with his community, and you'd be right. So, no. But a poor relationship with the community is something that some owners have. And it's almost like some owners in the past were proud of it. Harold Ballard. And it is bizarre to watch when an owner is in control of a team and acts like they don't like the team they're in control of. But again, for the NHL, what are they looking at? They're looking at financials. They're looking at attendance. They're looking at various things. And sure, they might step in and say, look, you've got this relationship with your community that doesn't work, and can you knock off all these posts you've been putting up? But are they going to remove the owner? No. The idea that an owner's going to get removed for egregious things they've done or said, it really doesn't happen very much in sports at all. So, and I say this knowing that there are other sports that have removed owners for various reasons, but poor relationship with community, I really don't think is necessarily one of them. Domestic issues can be. So domestic issues, this can be anything, really. So I would qualify, and it can pass into possible legal issues as well. This can be, well, he had a bad relationship at home with his kids and his wife, and this is what we've seen, with Vancouver, that's the accusation. But it's not the first owner to be, accused of these kinds of things, right? So And again, that can go into a legal issue as well. But domestic issues can be something like a DUI or speeding tickets or that kind of thing, which can then also be part of your relationship with the community, right? He does 120 down the main road because he knows he can pay all his speeding tickets. Doesn't matter. And he could just buy his way out of any trouble he gets. So there's legal issues as well. See, it all blends together, right? But if the legal issues got to the point where somebody's charged and convicted, I could see the NHL coming through, depending on the charge they're convicted of, and saying, okay, this is too much. It's bad PR. You've got to sell the team. One thing that the NHL, and one thing we've seen with GMs, and this I really think is true, there's an old style view of things. Everything will blow over. So any controversy, whatever it is, it'll blow over. It'll blow over. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. So I think they expect that, yeah, this is going on, but 2-3 weeks from now, everybody will have moved on. And generally speaking, that is usually the case. But it's not as much of the case now as it was in the 80s or the 90s, where everybody got away with everything and it didn't really matter. And we kind of looked and shrugged our shoulders and said, well, they got a lot of money and they're young, and what are you going to do? Owners, they got even more money. They're older guys, and well, they're idiosyncratic, they're odd, but what are you going to do? And there might be things that we look at now and say, wow, that's really creepy behavior. Well, yeah, but he's got a lot of money and he likes young women, so what's wrong with that? And that's the thing, right? And then that gets back to a poor relationship with the community. It all ties together. Now, threats to move the team, that's where things get serious. Ottawa, you guys know what I'm talking about here, right? And it is a way to make a community immediately hate the owner. As soon as an owner says, I'd hate to have to move, but yeah, I think we're going to have to move, fans are really not going to like that owner, Norm Green. So threats to move the team, and as bad as they get, the NHL won't step in unless you're Jim Balsley and you're saying, I'm going to take over this team and move it. And that's where the NHL says, no, you're not. You're not moving that team, so we're not going to let you take over the team. So we're not going to have this discussion. And so the NHL can step in and stop somebody taking over as an owner. We've seen that. And they do due diligence now, unlike John Spano. Not as many due diligence things done there. And I mean, they really haven't been on an owner for their personal behavior, I don't think, since Eddie Livingstone. I think that's the last one. And Livingstone, it really was a matter of the fact that the owners just didn't like him. It wasn't necessarily there was anything morally bad with him that they said they couldn't deal with. They just didn't like him. But I mean, hey, there might be people who personally know Eddie Livingstone that would tell me otherwise. But yeah, threats to move the team will immediately cause a problem between you and the fan base, and maybe between you and the league. But I believe it's a 2/3 majority of owners have to agree with a move. So this is why when people say, I don't understand why they don't just move this team. Well, unless 2/3 of the owners agree with that move, it's not happening. So you can buy a team. You can say, I'm moving it to Houston. I'm moving it to Quebec City. Wherever. Doesn't matter. Unless ownership is okay with it, it's not going anywhere. That team is not moving. So threats to move the team are, what they are. But outside of souring your relationship with the fans, I'm not sure what the point is. Then there's micromanaging the team. And again, this is something that's been discussed with Vancouver. It's something that's been discussed with other owners too, right? The idea that when Vancouver needed a rebuild, that it felt like ownership stepped in and said, no, we're not doing a rebuild. Trevor Linden ends up out. It just gets ugly. It's not the only team that's happened with, that kind of thing has happened with, where an owner's maybe in denial about where things are at, right? And maybe they're saying this player needs to go, this player can stay. I'm only paying this much for this. Nope, I don't want to give that guy this amount of money. And then you see him go off somewhere else, and he has tremendous success in the team that he's left. Sure, they saved that money, but they also didn't make the playoffs, or they didn't go as far, and clearly losing that player hurt them. But micromanaging the team, there are owners that I think feel like, hey, I've spent, say $500 million to buy this team. I spent $1 billion to buy this team. Yeah, I should have the right to say who's on the ice and who isn't. I should have the right to say how things go. Yeah, we missed the playoffs, but I don't have the patience for a rebuild. I don't want to go through a rebuild. Why can't we get back to the playoffs? We were in the playoffs last year. So, and there may be an ignorance in there where they don't really understand what happened and why it fell apart. They just know that it fell apart. And so micromanaging the team can be tough because in some cases, I think the fans may know more about what needs to happen with the team than the owner does, which makes it a little bit awkward. But again, you may not have that same emotional connection that the owner does. Or maybe the owner doesn't have an emotional connection. Maybe it's a matter of, hey, if this team gets back into the playoffs, I get those playoff revenue gates. I really need that revenue from the playoffs, so we need to get back to the playoffs. He may say, I'm not interested in missing the playoffs for the next 3 years. We need to be back in the playoffs, which I understand. From a business perspective, I understand, but from a sports perspective, it's not that simple, right? You can't just go out and get one or two players and then go there. We're back in the playoffs. You have to consider a lot of things, and then again, if you also have an owner that doesn't want to spend all the money but wants to have the success, well, that's a problem too. Mistreatment of staff. So 2.5 years ago now, when everything shut down, there were owners that kept people on, that kept on staff while they were making no money because they understood that this was, a major financial crisis and they could afford to pay the money. There were also owners that as soon as no money was coming in, they said, "Oh, you're all out of work. You'll all have to figure this out. You're all out of work until things open up again." And so while it is understandable from a business perspective, it is understandable that an owner would say, "There's no money coming in. You're all out of work." From a PR perspective, it's a nightmare. It's a disaster. So if you pay to keep them on for 2 months while everything's closed, you're paying them at home. It definitely helps from a PR perspective, right? So if you're cynical, you could look at owners that paid people the longest in 2020 while everything was closed down and say, well, they just did that for the good PR. See, and that's the fun part. We can not only discuss the egregious things that owners do, but then we can look at the good things they do through a cynical lens and say, well, yeah, but hey, sure, they did that nice thing. However, so mistreatment of staff is something that will affect your relationship with the community. There's the potential that if your mistreatment of staff isn't just of a financial, in a financial way, that it could lead to possible legal issues. And if you're abusive of your staff, then that's where the NHL could step in. Because if you're abusive of your staff and people know that you are, then that could lead to financial issues because people are going to stay away from your team in droves, or are they? That's always the question I have. Will people actually stay away? And in most cases, they don't. The one thing that, and this is at the bottom of the board for a reason, no accountability. For us as fans, it would appear there's no accountability, right? Owners can do whatever they want. But in reality, there's not a lot the NHL can do with the way things are set up. They can remove an owner, sure. Are they going to? Well, they need to have something serious, and they need to have something irrefutable to remove an owner, or he has to be named Eddie Livingstone. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot else in between there. And if you're wondering, what's this Eddie Livingstone he's talking about, go ahead and search the channel. There are 2 videos on Eddie Livingstone. And they show that when ownership collectively decides one owner is a problem, that owner doesn't stand much of a chance. They changed the name of the league from the NHA to the NHL to get rid of an owner. So all you have to do is change it to, I don't know, the National Hockey Committee. And, oh, sorry, now we're the NHC. We're sorry, you're no longer part of the league. And it's a hilarious story, and on some level, but not for Eddie Livingstone, definitely. But that was because all he did was argue with the owners. He argued with the other owners all the time, and they just didn't like him. They thought he was a jerk, and so they got rid of him. It is a remarkable difference between that world and the world we live in now. I guarantee there's owners that other owners don't like. That when he walks into the room, they all roll their eyes and say, "Oh, not him again." And maybe it's just that he keeps talking about his trip to Nantucket and what he did in the off season, and they're tired of hearing about the fish he caught and how great everything was. It might be something, or it might be he's a complete jerk. He's loudmouth. He's a complete jerk. But again, these are not reasons to remove an owner. There will be discussions on who should or shouldn't sell a team on the fan level. There will definitely be media discussions of which owners, these guys should sell the team. But from a National Hockey League perspective, what do they look at? They look at the stability of the franchise, the profitability of each franchise. They look at, definitely from a legal perspective, is there a legal issue here that could leave us exposed? No. Well, we're good. The NHL's already come up with a statement. Farhan Lalji reporting on the NHL saying basically the accusations against Aquilini are just that, and they are, and should be taken as such. But this is one of those things where the NHL says domestic issue. It's not a legal issue at this point. We're not stepping in. Is, I would think, where this ends up. And then we get into the discussion of the whole morality thing. And the reason that that can come up is because we've seen players have their contracts terminated for morality clause reasons. But we don't have that with owners. That's not how that works. Owners don't have that morality clause, so they could do the exact same thing a player does and not face any consequences for it. And that's where the no accountability comes in. And it's just, that's how the system's baked. That's how it works. And as much as I'm not a huge fan of it, and I'm not, that's how it's been for as long as I've been around. And I do think that there's a lot of things that we hear about with owners now that we wouldn't have back in the 80s and 90s. Same with players. I do also think that they expect it all to blow over. I think they figure, a few weeks and nobody will be talking about that anymore. And in most cases, it's true. In most cases, these things do blow over. But there are the incidents where an owner will get removed. It's very often, and again, from an NHL perspective, it's usually going to be for financial reasons. But in other sports, there have been morality reasons where an owner gets removed. I don't think we're there with any of the NHL owners today. I don't think we're there. And I know that's going to bother people. But just from a perspective of from a legal perspective, the NHL, it has to be a really high bar that they set. Because the other side of it is, if the NHL removes an owner and that owner didn't get removed for good reason and good cause, he can then turn around and sue the league for a ton of money too, and have a decent chance at winning that lawsuit. So it's all ugly, it's litigious and all that other fun stuff. And then from here, for the rest of the day, this conversation gets kind of pushed to the side and we talk about other hockey related things. There are times where it gets difficult to cover NHL topics because of things that maybe it's something that happened with an owner, with the NHL itself, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. But again, I think the fact that I've watched the league for 40 years and definitely all the gossip you hear over all the decades, nothing really surprises me at this stage. I wish it did, but it really doesn't. And so we'll see if anything changes. But at this point, I don't think it does. But let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And again, if you're wondering what brought this conversation on, there will be a link in the description to this video. And again, today it's one owner we're discussing, but there'll be others during the year. Because again, I think when the NHL brings in owners to buy a team, I think the most important thing is, how do they run their businesses? If they have other businesses, and they probably do. Are they profitable, and how much are they worth, and can they financially take care of the team? I don't think they get into the weeds on their personality and whether or not they're really good people. I don't think that really comes into it. But let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.